Education is key to success. We haven't taught up in 10. Each one had to teach one. Must bomb beside the one. We haven't taught us. Each one got to teach one. Let's learn from one another. Let's go.
Le ha re na le molaotheo o tjhatsi o matlafetseng lefatshe ka bophara, batjha ba Afrika Borwa ba tobane le mathata a mangata a kang a maikutlo, ho hola le ho fumana sebaka sa bona lefatsheng. Mathata ana a akaretsa bofuma bo matla le tlhokeho ya mesebetsi e bakwang ke ho se rutehe le ho hloka tsebo. Sena se re kgoromeletsa ho tshebediso e mpe ya tahi le dithethefatsi, tlhekefetso ya motabo, ho ima ho ka tlase dilemong, tshwaetso ya bohloko ba HIV le AIDS hammoho le mahloko a mang. Bonokwane ho lesa sekolo pele ho nako, ho iphumana o le tlasa kgatello setswalleng hammoho le mabaka a mang.
As a parent, how do you engage with your teen? As a young person, do you think your parents understand what you're going through on a daily basis? Do you talk with them? Do you talk with each other? If you don't, what is it that you expect from them to understand about what your challenges are daily? Hello, I'm Khalil Osiris, and this is Each One Teach One. The Each One Teach One program is designed to provide you with tools, tips, helpful hints on ways to effectively address the challenges that we face as a community around issues of discipline, around issues of drug addiction, around the kinds of issues that on a daily basis overwhelm most of us. When I say community, I'm talking about teens, our youth population. I'm talking about parents. I'm talking about educators. All of us who have a vested interest in being a part of the solutions that will change our communities for the better.
Mathata ana a tobaneng le batjha ha a me bona fela a thefula moruo wa naha le kgolo hobane menyetla ya ntshetsopele e ba siko.
Are you an adult sitting at home who feels that you've done your part because you've raised your children? They're grown, they're successful, they've gone on with their lives. Is the contribution that you're making to young people today one that you can be proud of? Are you fearful of them when you see them at a robot? Do you roll up your windows? Do you remove yourself from any situation where you feel there might be a conflict between you and the young people in your community? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then this program is for you as well. Even though you don't have children at this moment, even though you're removed from the responsibility of being a parent. Each One Teach One suggests to each of us that we have a continuing role to play, a lifelong role to play in the nurturing and the raising of our children. I say this as an adult who understands that though my own children are grown, I have a responsibility to be a role model and a leader for the young people in my community.
I want you to bring your A game in wishing them their best. I want you to recognize that your energy and your thinking will contribute to their success. I want you to see that they've traveled a path that you're now traveling.
I remember well what it was to be a young person who didn't believe that adults cared much. Though I had both parents, I didn't really communicate with them very well. In fact, I would say that there was not very good communication at all. I ended up very angry as a young person. It was a time in America called the Civil Rights Movement. And during that period, there emerged a political party called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. I was one of the young kids, one of the youthful members of the community who was targeted by the party. I ended up becoming an organizer. And though I had been a good student, very good at academics and sports, I was troubled. My parents didn't really know what to do. The adults in my family didn't really know how to help. And no one had ever really taught them what to do in a case like mine. That anger that I felt as a young person increasingly became delinquent behavior. My grades started to fall. My interest in school seemingly over a period of time disappeared. And ultimately, that delinquency ended up in crime. At the age of 17, I committed a robbery. I was convicted and sent to prison. The month was June, the year was 1976 in America. I would serve 5 years in prison for a robbery. And I can tell you that nothing in my life up to that point had prepared me for what I was going to experience in prison. And after 5 years, I was released from a maximum security prison. And what do you imagine happened? What course do you think my life took from that point forward? I can tell you, it got worse. I returned to crime, except that now I was much more angry. I was much more violent, and I was much more intentional. Because what I learned in prison at that stage in my life was how to become more criminal. So I ask you, the viewer, whether you're a child, a young person, a teen who's angry and disillusioned, a parent who's struggling with what to do with your child, I ask you, is it possible for us to do something different? Is it possible for us to reach a person like that? And if so, how will we do it? Each One Teach One seeks to answer some of those tough questions.
Let's learn from one another. Let's learn from one another. Let's
Welcome back. I'm Khalil Osiris. This is Each One Teach One. And during the next 6 months, I'm going to share a journey with you about how to deal with the challenges of parenting in the 21st century. I'm only going to speak from personal experience. We'll bring in a wealth of other information, but I want you to know that the heart and soul of this conversation and this journey that we go on together is going to come out of my lived experiences. I want you to think for a second about how in the life of Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu and other great political struggle veterans, how they took this very important idea and used it in a way that began to transform their lives even while in prison. How they would, at Robben Island, find themselves spending time with each other during the short breaks between the hard labor that was mandated as the prison experience. How they crafted a way to use every second to share a message of hope, to teach each other, to inspire each other. Each one teach one. They found in it a way to begin to transform their thinking about what it meant to be at Robben Island. They found in this title, this concept, this idea of Each One Teach One, an opportunity to begin to be personally responsible for how to help the other. You see, for me, sitting in prison, serving year after year with a great question as to how I would survive it, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and many, many others became icons. They became inspiration for me to turn my life around. And I took Each One Teach One and applied it to my own life. Because I had men like them who were teaching me. And I knew that as they taught me, I had a responsibility to teach someone else. Each one teach one. Who will you teach? Who has taught you? What have you learned from those who have been your teachers? And how will you take what you have learned and help someone else to be a better person, to be their best? Because you're determined to be your best. Yes, I was in prison. I served 20 years. But I'll tell you something, during that time, I learned some invaluable lessons along the way. I ended up earning my master's degree from Boston University. I ended up becoming pen pals and writing Nelson Mandela while he was at Poolsmoor. I made a commitment to him, looking at my own life and how hopeless it seemed for so long, and then learning about him and being inspired. I made a commitment to him that I would come to South Africa and work in schools with young people who are challenged by day-to-day problems and issues. I made a commitment to him that I would come here and work with prisoners and formerly incarcerated individuals, with families who are struggling with how to turn this issue of crime around in South Africa. That was in 1987. Today, all these years later, here I am. Each one teach one is meaningful to me because I understand my responsibility to not just share with others what they can do or what they should be doing, but also to share the story of what I'm doing personally. When I say that I work in schools and I work in prisons, we have a program in schools called Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, PBIS Africa. And the focus of the program is based on 3 principles. Number 1, all behavior is learned. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, who the people are that you see, what their race, what their color, what their gender is, all behavior is learned. Second, misbehavior. The worst behavior that we see can be unlearned. It doesn't matter if you find yourself having habits that don't seem to serve you, habits that create problems for you in your life, all behavior can be unlearned, and particularly bad behavior can be unlearned. And the third point, positive behavior must be taught, modeled, practiced, and reinforced. We don't just do that in schools. We also do work in prison. We have a program called Get Out and Stay Out, GOSO. And the ideal of GOSO is that every person who is in prison can actually get out before they're physically released. Now, I know for some of you, you'll find that a bit strange. It comes from an understanding of having been in prison myself. What I recognized when I was there was that actually I was in prison long before I was ever arrested. And you might say, well, what do I mean by that? What I realized in my own case was that the source of my imprisonment, the source of my being in prison, was not simply the cell that I was sitting in. It wasn't even simply the prison that I found myself. The source of my imprisonment was my own thoughts, my own values, my own choices. Because it was my thoughts, my values, and my choices that led me to creating in my life a prison. But my awakening, the thing that really was the turning point for me in my life, was that if I was in prison before I was incarcerated, if I was actually locked up in my own mind before I was set in a prison cell, I could get out before I was released. And that's what we mean, get out and stay out. It's the pathway to changing your thinking, to changing your values, to changing your choices, so that you can take power over your life and decide never, ever, ever to go back to prison once released.
Let's learn from one another. Let's go. Let's learn from one another. Let's go.
I want to ask you a couple questions, and I want you just to take a couple moments to think deeply and honestly about them. Have you personally ever had challenges that you thought you couldn't overcome? Have you ever been depressed and so disappointed with your own life that you didn't know what direction you should go in? Have you ever been to prison? Have you ever been bullied? Have you been someone who felt that you were a victim and you didn't really know how to pull yourself out of that situation? These are the kinds of questions that we're going to explore together. Yes, they're very personal questions. These questions that we're going to ask you to think about. And in many cases, as this program unfolds, we're going to ask you to actually participate in helping us to solve them, to overcome them. But it's going to require something from you, something very personal. It's going to require from you a willingness to take responsibility for changing our community. Not just the community that you live in locally, but our national community, our society. We're going to ask of you to join hands with us and become part of the solution for South Africa. And this is not just about the adult. I'm asking this question of you sitting there watching this program right now, who's a teenager, a troubled teenager, a teenager who feels that maybe life is hopeless. I want to know what you'll do for yourself. I want to know what you will do because you take responsibility for making better choices or making the best choice that you can under the circumstances. Yes, I know that it's not all in your control. We're fully aware of that. But that's not the part we're going to focus on in Each One, Teach One. The part we will focus on is that very special space that we all live in called personal responsibility. It's that space. It's that power. It's that genius. And it's that opportunity that I'm asking you to seize upon now. I don't know that you'll change immediately. And I don't expect that the circumstances and conditions you find yourself in will immediately go away and everything will be fine. No, that's not what we're suggesting. I'm saying to you it's going to be hard. I'm saying to you it's going to be a difficult road. But I want you to know from personal experience, having served 20 years in prison and being 40 years old when I got out, that the operative word for you to remember in everything that you face, where there's a history of struggle and defeat and failure, the operative word is that it's history. It's the past. And you have the power to do something with the present. So this program, this journey, this challenge is about what we do with that moment called the present. It doesn't matter what your particular problems may be. What matters is what you'll do with it. What will you resolve? What will you decide personally that will make a difference in turning your life around? Having been in prison, having suffered through the disappointment of making horrible choices, having found myself at 25 years old, facing 75 years in prison, which for me was a life sentence, I know what it's like firsthand to think that life is over. But I also know that as long as you're determined to make good choices, even in the face of difficult situations, there's the hope for something better. And it's that hope that each one teach one speaks to. It's the hope of my power to make a difference being used in the right way, in a way that's meaningful, actually has a real life consequence for good. It's the kind of hope that we expect to inspire in you, and we expect that you will inspire in others as we share this journey together. I want to invite you to join me on this journey of each one teach one. I want to invite you to be a light to someone around you. I want you to think of your experiences, no matter how difficult or troubling they have been. I want you to think of them as opportunities to learn. And I want you to think of that learning as a light. The Each One Teach One program is about that light. And I'm inviting you to join me on this journey so that each of us make a commitment to stay in the light.
Kgoliati ena e re tobaneng le yona jwale ka batswadi, barutabana mmogo le batjha e ka hlola fela ke ha re ka kopana ra bangata e le nngwe. Bekeng tse 26 tse latelang, Each One Teach One e tla be e shebane le ntlha tsena tsa bohlokwa. Ho tloha ho kgatello setswalleng, ho inyatsa, bofuma malapeng.
He was crying with the cramps on the stomachs. But we can smell Dacha was being smoked inside the house. We asked him. He never answered anything. He said, "Mommy, I'm dying."
Ho ima ho kgahla se dilemo.
Your child, you try to do the best for them. But if she started to be pregnant now, you feel like you wasted everything because I was so angry.
Hammoho le obesity.
Some people will say things to me that I don't like. Like they will say, "Oh, you look big. You look bigger than your mom." And I've tried so many methods of losing weight, but I end up giving up.
And don't forget to live life to the fullest, because life isn't about finding yourself, but it's about creating yourself. Live as if you're to die tomorrow, and learn as if you're to live forever, because the journey of 1,000 miles must begin with the first step.
We want you to know that when we talk about Each One Teach One, that the work that we're doing, the work that we're personally committed to, is beyond the TV program. It's the work that we live on a daily basis. It is completely our commitment to being the best person that we can and being that elder in the community who believes that every child is our collective responsibility. This is the message. This is the hope. And this is the expectation that we have for you who's viewing this as we speak. For you personally to make a difference and for you personally to make a commitment.